standard time, I'm actually going to be doing a Q&A session, and it's going to be hosted through tomorrow with our new Space Agency head and some of the leaders that were behind developing the plan that the government have just officially announced last week around how we're developing a new space agency. So I started Moonshot, and I started, I guess, getting into this game before our federal government were interested in a space agency. And I became really interested in this area and trying to grow the Australian space industry in particular, because space agencies, I didn't see it was necessarily necessary in Australia to have a space agency beyond the policy and regulation side. We already had around 40 space companies in the country, space startups, I should say. Now we've got around 80. And so what I would like to see from the agency and what the agency is going to become is a very, very lean organization. It's not going to be like NASA, and it's not going to be like ESA. It's going to be something more similar to the UK Space Agency, where it's very industry focused. It's really there to support and provide, cultivate the space industry, whether it's startups, whether it's the industry primes, from doing the projects that we need that have commercial value to them. But also creating those connections that we need with international organizations. So whether like ESA, like NASA, like JAXA, and providing those opportunities for industry that are in our country to interact with the rest of the world, which is something that's up until now has been fairly difficult because Australia doesn't do space. So why would you ever contract an Australian space company to do something? So hopefully that changes, especially because Australia actually has a very, very strong space history.
It does.
We
Absolutely.
were essentially one of the founding nations of ESA.
Yeah.
We had we were the third country in the world to have launched a satellite off of our own soil, and then we just sort of died down in our activity for quite a long time. So it's really exciting that we're finally getting back into it, and I'm really excited to play a really big role in facilitating those international connections and getting the whole commercial industry around the world churning at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know I speak for quite a few people that we're absolutely excited to see what Australia has in store and what amazing things it can contribute because, based on the limited knowledge I have of the history of the Australian space activity, it's pretty impressive. And so when I heard about what you were doing, it was really exciting to see just such a potentially amazing feat be accomplished again and grown. So I want to ask, so for those who are watching who are like really inspired now, like, oh my goodness, I've always wanted to work in the space tech industry, but I was always intimidated because legal stuff, money stuff, blah, blah, blah. What's your biggest advice for somebody who actually wants to make a real impact in the space industry, but might be a little intimidated?
So the first thing I'd say is don't be afraid to try out small things and fail. Try to think of really small ways that you can, if you think you've got an idea, try to test that and build that up. And so this is what we do with our Gemini program. We're just about to launch a new thing called the Gemini Space Network, where we're going to try to help get the community on board to help with this as well. So find a mentor, just try to reach out to people to run ideas past, and try to find a partner to bounce these ideas off as well. The more that you run tiny little experiments. So it's a very scientific way of doing things to build this, to build a business up as well. You don't have to spend too much money to build a space company. You don't have to be a tech billionaire anymore. If you can prove to somebody, your family and friends even, that you've got a really good idea for this really small thing, and you just need to do this small experiment to get that next stage. You need to get $10,000. That might be what it is, but it might be that you're eventually aiming to, say, build an entire space station that might be $100 billion in the end. So the first thing I would say is sign up to a newsletter, and when we launch Gemini Ideator in October, you definitely want to be involved with that because we talk about this and we work you through it over a 12-week course. But you can run very, very small experiments to prove that you've got a solid business model for a great idea. And slowly get more and more people on board with that. So you have to be yourself, or you have to find people that can do it for you. Be very technically oriented. If it's a big engineering thing, find someone who's good with the business side, but definitely also find someone that's great with communication and that marketing, because you have to be really able to sell yourself and sell your story. Why are you passionate about this? And also, why is this a very valuable thing for for the rest of the world to care about, which is actually, ironically, a difficult thing for space startups. A lot of people immediately dismiss space because they think it's just for big governments around the world still, and they're just developing these rockets and satellites and launching people to Mars, but they don't really understand the real valuable aspects. So if you can communicate the value to people, and you can really prove that as well, especially if you start looking at talking to investors, then that is really the key there.
Nice. And so our very own Lisa Stoge at Mini Stoge has a really good question. And we don't want you to play favorites or anything, but she asks, which of the teams from your accelerators/ideators do you think will have the most impact?
Oh, wow, that's a fantastic question.
It's kind of like asking, who's your favorite child?
Yeah. Okay. I think, well, I can't really play favorites too much. I think the ones, especially because, we really push people as they're developing their ideas, we really push people to come up with ones that will really try to change, positively shape humanity. I think the ones that will have the greatest immediate impact are actually the ones that a lot of people might see as less exciting, which is around using Earth observation data for us here on Earth. And so it might not necessarily be that you're building the satellites like what Planet do or Spire. It may be just processing that data here on the ground and using AI and machine learning and things like that to develop useful insights into that. But looking forward into the future, I definitely think that some of the more pardon me, the more seemingly crazy things like developing medicines in low Earth orbit, or one that I would really love to see soon is companies that are developing, how can we actually grow crops in space? If we're going to have a cislunar deep space gateway very, very soon, it would be much better if we can start to grow food in space over there. And if you could do that, there's a great commercial opportunity there too. So some of those really deep tech solutions that people are starting to work on now, I think they're going to have a huge impact, because that's going to change the course of humanity if we do become a multiplanetary species. And only until we have that, we can have all the BFRs and all the Blue Origin rockets that are going to Mars that we want. But until we have the ability to be sustainable there through a lot of these other technologies that not that many people are talking about in the public yet, we won't actually reach that point. So anyone developing stuff around manufacturing in space or mining and manufacturing in space and growing foods and things like that, that is, I think, going to be the biggest impact that I'm most excited to see.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I mean, kind of like you've been touching on, the space tech kind of encapsulates so many different trades and so many different skill sets. And so we actually have a really good question from Hanny's Forwerp off Twitch. And they ask, do you do outreach to local schools? And I will expand on that. What type of outreach in general do you do? Because certainly you're passionate about getting the word out. So in what ways do you do that?
That was great, because I was just going to tack on to my last one there. The other one that I really wanted to mention was the educational side of space as well. So companies like CubeWriter, who again I'm sort of playing favorites because they're in Australia as well, but they're developing small payloads that they put onto the International Space Station, and they teach school children how to write code for them, and they upload the code while it's actually in space. So you can be a child in school now and actually writing code for a real spacecraft in space. Things like that, I think, are incredibly valuable. So at the moment, Moonshot itself is not exactly, we're not doing a lot of stuff with schools. I sometimes go and do talks and things like that. But one of the things that we were facilitating, or are facilitating with the Melbourne Space Program, that not-for-profit program that I built that is running still in Melbourne, is doing a lot of outreach. And things like teaching children how to write code, doing things like developing small payloads that go up on weather balloons and things like that, and just those really practical, tangible things that I think a lot of children, it's very easy for them to sort of think of science as sometimes quite, I guess, boring if they just don't engage with it. So by using space again as this really inspirational thing really, really early on, and showing children that these are the cool things that science and technology are doing for us. That I think is the key to great educational outreach.
Oh, well, that's very inspiring. I mean, I'm already inspired, my goodness. I kind of wish that when I was younger, especially in grade school, that somebody kind of would have come in and talked to us more about, because especially, I mean, it's getting better now, but kind of the gender bias back when I was a kid, it's like, you know, tech and engineering wasn't exactly as accessible, but goodness knows where I would be now if somebody, I mean, not that I don't love where I am, because I'm sitting here with you and in this beautiful studio, but, you know, if somebody would have come to me and been like, hey, like, you could literally be a rocket scientist, or you could run your own space company. I mean, as a little kid to hear that, oh my goodness, you know, it just really opens up the possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it goes a little bit further than that as well. You know, even if, you know, for you know, people that are, I guess, more of high school age and even, you know, early university, who may not have ever thought of space as a potential career path because they see it as just science and technology. There's a lot of people. This is again going back to when I was building the Melbourne Space Program. There was a lot of people that, you know, when we went to them at the law school, we said, hey, we need a legal team to start studying space policy. A lot of people were like, wait, what? I can start doing space stuff? Like, this is great because I'm not that great at math. And a lot of them were, but they say, I'm not that great at math, but I can actually help here. And you know, science communication is a huge one. I think that's one of the most important aspects. And this, I love you guys at TMRO for this. It's a little bit meta talking about it. But a lot of people just don't think of these things unless you are in, you know, science or engineering. And as the more that we communicate this, I think, you know, the more people start to think about, well, actually, yeah, of course, yeah, I do want to work for SpaceX, and I'm not an engineer, but you know, they really need someone who can communicate what they're doing, or they really need a lawyer for this sort of thing. So, you know, you can strive for that almost regardless of what industry you are really passionate about and what want to work in. Yeah. As long as, yeah, if you are passionate about space, it's something for you.
That is so neat. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, especially because, I mean, not to go back to my personal academic career, but I actually did switch from an astrophysics major to a communications major simply because I enjoyed talking about science so much that, you know, so you're right. It's very important to, you know, let people know, especially at that higher academic level, like, hey, really, you could come from any background and still contribute to this amazing revolution going on in the world right now. And actually, so going back to establishing Australia as a real space authority, we have a comment asking from Rebel Ace Frislon, what are the science and engineering competences that the AUS Oceanic excels in?
Okay, so I'll start off with Melbourne because and this is one of the things that I thought that was, you know, you hear a lot, oh, you know, the city you're in is the world's best at this, or you're really good at that. And then I started traveling around the world hearing that one of the great things that Victoria as a state and Melbourne is quite good at is GIS, so geographic information systems and spatial information and things like that. So that's one of the really interesting, strong areas that we have. But just sort of generally overall, we do have a pretty powerful, I guess, engineering and science capability. We just until now have not really been able to have the jobs and the organizations to give our you know, people in those areas a chance to do much with it and to be innovative. And so one of the interesting things I've seen going around the world, you know, as we launch the Gemini program and all this sort of thing, is that literally everywhere I go and I say, like, I've got to meet up here in Boulder, Colorado, or in Singapore, there's always Australians around that are working in the space industry that have had to leave the country just to practice and just to participate in the industry they've always wanted to work in. So I know this is sort of a vague answer to the question. What are the things that we're really strong in? I think that we do have a lot of, as Australian people, we have a great engineering capability, and that we will see, you know, a lot of stuff sort of across the board, whether it's satellite and rocket manufacturing. So that, for example, I think I mentioned both the companies already, and it's funny because the federal government, up until a couple of years ago, had a stance that Australia would never be doing anything with satellite systems ourselves or developing rockets and that sort of space infrastructure. But two of the most well-funded space companies in Australia so far are Fleet Space, who are developing a fleet of 100 satellites for IoT access, so it's very small bandwidth telecommunications access around the world, and Gilmore Space, who are, I think, about 6 months to 12 months away from launching their first orbital hybrid rocket. And so, yeah, so it's going to be a very interesting time.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, that's so exciting too. And just to see, I'm sure the trajectory is just going to be almost exponential in terms of, how fast and how, amazing things are going to start to evolve from here for Australia. Not only, I guess, just in the space tech industry, but I mean, that's going to affect so many other industries in the periphery as well. So really excited to see that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So what's next on the horizon for Moonshot? I saw that you guys were a little quiet for the first few months of this year, but a lot of things were happening, obviously. You were definitely hard at work. So what's next?
Yeah, so next is making sure I get through my email inbox because it's a little bit unmanageable at the moment. So sorry if I haven't quite gotten back to you yet. So yeah, we've been absolutely flat out. Like you mentioned at the very beginning, we are actually a startup. We don't talk about it too much, but we really are. We're just trying to do really big things. So we've just launched, or we've just announced that we're taking applications at the moment for our first space accelerator. We hope to launch more of those accelerators around the world, especially at the different stages, to address different stages of the space startup lifecycle and for different kinds of space startups as well. And then in the future, and we'll probably start looking into this soon, we want to start building out what we've been calling Moonshot Ventures, which is really to tackle that scaling up stage of space businesses. So providing, to give you access to the capital and to the investors that are happy to take these really high risks and understand the space industry, to provide you with the capital to get from seed level, Series A onwards, so that you can scale and tackle a global or cislunar market. And that way we can, that's us sort of taking people all the way from that very first idea and trying to just communicate what technologies and opportunities are out there, all the way to helping a company solve a global market. And one of the other things that we don't really talk about too much because it's not our core function, but we have just started a consulting side as well, because we do a lot of consulting with governments from, particularly in Australia at the moment. We're starting to talk to the New Zealand government and the Singaporean government, some others as well. And we've almost got a partnership with a big consulting firm so that we can work on the other side. So we can work with both terrestrial and aerospace primes and put them into contact with potential suppliers who may be startups or SMEs around the world who are developing new things that these primes just don't know about. And so that's sort of closing the loop on bringing that ecosystem together again.
Yeah, I mean, geez, global ecosystem in some of those countries that you mentioned too, like, my goodness. And that was actually a question I had. I understand that, you really want to democratize the space tech industry and go into areas that have a lot of potential, but just probably didn't have the resources. But there's other things holding them back as well. I mean, as you mentioned, like the geoclimate, or I'm sorry, the political climate or the legal climate of whatever country. Yeah. So how do you kind of customize how you develop these companies, say if they're in a remote part of any different continent, like, because every little area is so different from one another.
Yeah, that's right, and it is really, really interesting. So far it's been relatively easy, and I say relative, it's definitely not easy. Yeah. So with the Gemini program, it's pretty I guess standard stuff. It doesn't really matter too much about the the legal side of things at that stage, because you're just coming up with, what is a really good idea to solve for the world? How do you start to develop a business around that? And then you sort of, when you get to things like incorporating a company, what are the laws around that? And if I'm going to be developing another rocket launch company, what would I have to look into sort of at that stage, when I actually come to that? That's where it does start to get a little bit tricky, and it gets really interesting as I travel around and get to talk to people who are having those problems too. So we actually leverage a lot of local leaders and mentors and experts in those areas to consult and to mentor people in those areas of the world on those topics. So that's how we sort of address that there. As we start to launch more accelerators that are a little bit further down the track, especially when you get to things like the deal with the Outer Space Treaty and various other treaties, whether it's with regards to mining on the moon or whatnot. That's where it's going to be a little bit more tricky. But even now, we're starting to have conversations with people that are even looking at, like ITAR is a very big one. Getting questions like, should I'm American, should I found my company here in the US, or should I go elsewhere? And looking at what markets will be available. And it was interesting because there's a couple of companies that we've spoken to that have started in the US and said, no, we've moved away from the US specifically because we see the emerging market that isn't within the international arms trading regulations will be growing enough for us to be happy with. And so I don't have an exact answer to this. I think that it's going to be very interesting in the next little while, especially because space is still so, I guess, it's a very militarized topic, but it's also becoming a much more accessible and democratized area as well. I'll get back to you on that one in a little while.
Nice. Well, I'm excited to hear it. And so that actually leads us into a really good question from Travis Neal on YouTube once again. He asks, how do you vet out projects you choose to take on? What is your criteria for good risk?
Okay, so this again, Travis, great questions today.
On fire, Travis.
So projects that we take on, particularly at the very, very beginning, every idea is likely to be a good idea. The ones that I really, really like are the ones that are very, very ambitious. And we try to work with people that are going to go back to first principles, and rather than say, look, this isn't going to work for X, Y, Z reason, try to work out, well, if this is a really good problem to solve, how can you solve that problem? And so we sort of, I guess, in a way, we sort of take on all projects at that stage. When we start to get further down the track, so for example, for this accelerator, you actually need to be a relatively high caliber team to qualify for this one, the one we're running with StartMate. And so we're looking for teams that are doing, I guess, very inspirational projects that are going to be quite tough. But what we want to see at that stage is that you've thought about, how are you going to make revenue, and maybe at least started to think about or be aware about the fact that you might need to try to make revenue in some other way earlier on. So let's say, you're developing, let's see if I can come up with an example off the top of my head. So let's say you're developing I'm going to use a space tug. Let's say you're developing a space tug to move satellites into different orbits, and it might take you 10 to 15 years or whatever it is to actually develop that technology. How can you start commercializing some of the technology that you'll need for that eventually for terrestrial applications or maybe space applications here today, so that you can focus on building your revenue stream up? If we see that, then you're a much lower risk team than saying, look, we're going to do this really far out thing, and we've got this great leap of faith that we have to make. So it's more about the team and how much the team, I guess, are aware of the potential issues and challenges surrounding what it is they want to do, than it is the actual idea itself. But we do want to see that it's a very ambitious and potentially very impactful idea as well.
Wow, absolutely. And I think I found a very appropriate closing comment from user Banjo Lily saying, "This is great. He's working towards that Star Trek Orville future. I love the idea that space belongs to everyone. The more humanity we can get on board, the better we will be and the faster we will get there." And I could not said that
exactly
as
right.
Right? I couldn't said it better
You
myself.
get it, yeah.
So we like to conclude every interview with a series of what we call standard questions. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions. They're a little open-ended, and keep in mind there are no wrong answers, so answer as you see fit. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
Go.
Okay, so the first question is, what is your favorite space mission, past, present, or future?
Okay, I think definitely favorite space mission has to be Apollo 11. I know that's probably a little bit cliche, but it has to be the favorite mission for obvious reasons, especially after having met Buzz.
Oh, wow. Absolutely. I would be biased, too, if I met Buzz. Okay, so human or robot exploration of the cosmos?
Both.
Both?
I think so apart from the spacing, I do a lot of thought about, AI and how humans are evolving, and, what does it mean to be human? Obviously, you've heard me say human 1,000 times during this interview. I think it's going to be both. And it's sort of, it already is. We can't go into space without having robotics and all that technology around us anyway. So we're augmented by that anyway. I think there's definitely opportunities, especially space mining and autonomous space mining, things like that will definitely be, will probably lack that human presence for a little while. But ultimately, I think it's really important for us to continue to use technology to increase our capabilities. And that obviously means doing that as we go out further into space.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where should we go next?
Again, good question. It sounds so simple. I think, obviously, I'd like to see more of a presence around the moon, at least to begin with, because I think it's a much more achievable goal and somewhere to explore where we can still. There's a lot more to be gained by exploring that area, and then obviously trying to go to Mars after that. But I think I'd really like to, again. This is probably starting to look a little bit too far down the track, but I don't mind thinking about the sci-fi aspects of this. But starting to look at going to, setting up colonies on some of the moons of Saturn would be particularly interesting to think about as well. So, where are we going to go after Mars? I think is a question that not many people are talking about. Not that I'm bored of talking about Mars, because that's going to be absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. But if we can start thinking about, rather than trying to make a leap from Mars to going to, planets around another star, where else can we go in the solar system? How are we going to expand between that? From going from A to B, what about from B to C as opposed to B to Z?
Oh, very cool. Why space?
Why space? Space, yes. So space for me is, like I said, is that intersection of science and entrepreneurship. And it's really about, again, I'm going to use the word humanity. You could probably have a counter on here. I love the concept of, that space is really about us, about ourselves. It's not about just, going out into the universe. It's really about us. And I think that really, is really clear when you talk to any astronaut, anyone who's been into space and looked back on Earth, and they have that the overview effect. And they sort of simultaneously recognize both how insignificant and significant we are at the same time. And for me, this is such a, I guess, it's almost a very spiritual thing. Why space? Because it's I think it's what we're destined to do. It's about us understanding ourselves. We're essentially made up of space dust and stardust. We've become sentient, and we're understanding ourselves and the universe that we're in. And I think that, it's a very symbolic thing for humanity, really.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for answering those questions. We actually got a lot of really good insight out of all of those, so thank you for standing with us. And thank you so much for getting up super early, if you even did fall asleep last night, and interviewing with us. Troy, that was an amazing interview, and we definitely look forward to what Moonshot continues to do for the world and the space tech industry. So thanks again, and we definitely look forward to speaking.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we definitely look forward to speaking to you again in the future when one of the companies you help cultivate ends up, taking us to Mars and beyond. So thanks again. And for everybody else, go ahead and stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we are going to answer questions and comments from the last show. So I will see you in just a few seconds.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fumble little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation. This girl's a fascination, and nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving, through the heat keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
And welcome back. Now, before we get started into looking at comments and questions from last week's show, we did want to give a huge shout out to all the citizens of tomorrow who have contributed to this particular segment. The Escape Velocity citizens get their name in every segment of the show. Thank you so much for your guys' support. We also have our Orbital citizens that are contributing $5 per episode on Patreon, and our Suborbital citizens contributing $2.50 per episode on Patreon. They get their name in the third segment of the show and access to our exclusive citizen-only hangouts and so much more. Every little bit helps, and we would not be able to make this show without you guys. Thank you so much. Sorry, I get a little teared up every time.
It's okay. You're going to be okay.
I'm just amazed at your guys' generosity. So please, if you would like to get more information, please check out patreon.com/TMRO. So, Let's get into comments and questions about last week's show. Last week we had on Tim Ellis, the CEO of Relativity Space, which is a launch company using 3D printed technology to have an entirely 3D printed rocket, not just certain parts, and to have a lot of automation. So anyway, the first comment comes off of YouTube. This comes off of Old Gamer Noob. I hope that you become a lead at some point.
Oh, goodness gracious.
His question is, can those 3D printed robots print other 3D printer robots?
Ooh, we actually, I think we asked that, like,
Yeah.
during the interview.
Yeah.
And it got very Von Neumann-esque. Like, it's like Inception. Yeah, absolutely.
Like the end of the world will be upon us because it will just be 3D printers all the way down. So.
They'll be like the new Daleks, and it'll just,
Exactly.
instead of exterminate, it's recreate.
Thankfully though, they do not have AI, and a human would have to program to do that. So we
Yet.
hopefully won't
That
have
would
that
be
program
really
anytime
interesting,
soon.
yeah.
Yet.
But
speak
if
so
it does,
soon.
if it does happen, we should at least be able to save the world by having a printer jam. Finally.
We were
Oh,
capable.
that's so good.
Finally.
That's great.
The one time we actually want a printer jam.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, let's move on to our next comment. This one also comes off of YouTube. This is from Ronak Mystery. And he says, I'm a graduate student here in the United States, and I absolutely love the approach that local organizations take for involving interns. I'm from India, and we didn't really have this system in place when I went to college. I believe it plays a huge role in getting students ready for what's out there. It's beneficial to the students and the organization as well. I'm sure that the internships at Blue Origin and SpaceX made sure that this brilliant idea came to fruition for the founders. Kudos to the entire Relativity team for their constant innovation. So yeah, definitely. Those type of internships are what helped move so many people forward. I mean, just thinking of the different SpaceX engineers that we've met that started off as one of the interns, or even people who started off as an intern and then went on to do their own thing. I mean, it's not exactly the same for Tim because he actually, I believe that he was a paid employee of SpaceX for a while before going off to, or rather of Blue Origin before going off to found Relativity. But that's how a lot of people are getting their start. So
Yeah, and internships are really good because you can learn a lot in a classroom, and you can understand the fundamentals, and you could model things on a computer, and you can write the code. But there's something about being in the actual environment
Exactly.
that completely changes your mindset and your understanding and your work ethic and you as a person. And really, that's the core of an internship. It's not necessarily, hey, I'm here to work. It's more, hey, I'm here to experience what I'm planning to do in my life.
Exactly.
And that is so important. And that's what a lot of people miss with internships,
Yeah.
is that outright experience that you get with it.
yeah.
Especially too for like applicable sciences like engineering and science. Like you
Absolutely.
actually need to be in the fields
Yeah.
creating model rockets,
Yes.
you know, and
NASA
showing that off as its
interns,
reality.
these Blue Origin SpaceX interns, they're actually working. They're not just
Exactly.
getting coffee.
And you think about like when the
Yeah.
average like engineering grad student like leaves school and then goes to work for like a Blue Origin or a SpaceX or a Boeing, like it takes 2 to 3 years for them to get fully acclimated to what they're ultimately going to be doing. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's a lot of investment on the employer's end. But there's some really experiential internships out there these days that's like, oh, I already know how to CAD. Oh, I can already 3D print this part for you. And so I think it's the next step in education in general, just being more hands-on.
Yeah. I feel like culture too is involved with that as well,
yeah.
because like in engineering there is like a culture involved in it. Like you kind of like worship coffee and look at math as sort of telling your life. Yeah, no sleep till
Rocket
we
launch.
CDR. Anyways, so yeah, and that's important too because you can do all the work that you want, but if it's not a culture you actually want to be involved
Exactly.
with,
Blood,
you're
sweat,
not
and
really gonna
tears.
enjoy it. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, anyway, moving on to our next comment. This one also comes off of YouTube. This is from Electro41587. And they say that Robonaut was a horrible design. For a robot in space, you do not need a head and such detailed hands and fingers. A four-limbed robotic octopus designed based on Robonaut's legs and just its torso with changeable tool sets at the end of its limbs is a far, far better design for a robot in space.
I kind of don't want to make fun of this comment too much, but it's very much like, you don't need detailed hands and fingers, but tentacles, yes. Because that's so much easier to make than hands and fingers.
Yeah.
So just throwing that out there.
I love it. I actually did some research on this too, because I was like, wait a second, why does Robonaut have a head? I was like, okay, there has to be a reason. Obviously, because it's supposed to be a humanoid, so it's supposed to kind of look like human. But other than that, I actually was finding out that its eyes have 2 different video cameras in it that allows for stereo vision. So it actually, what is it? It goes from the left to the right camera, and it constantly is comparing images. And then it's actually able to measure depth perception by using its parallax and comparing apparent vision. And so, apparent difference in objects that are moving. And honestly, like, that's the whole purpose too, because it's supposed to be conducting and actually doing human tasks. So if it's supposed to do that, then that's why it has things like this. So I was like, maybe it's just an empty thing. And no, because then also all the information that's retrieved, it's then actually being sent then to other parts that's inside of it, and that's how it's able to communicate then with its arms and its pieces, not feet, different pieces, its torso and everything. And a little fun fact I actually read too is that its arms have a greater range than human arms, and has like 150 sensors in it. That's just like, that's insane.
Its arms can like go completely around.
So it's a dancer, basically.
My arms could go completely around, but it would hurt a lot.
Yeah,
we can do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also I think like that's really cool that the functionality is probably awesome. But another thing too is the fact that it just kind of comes back to, the everyday relevance for each of us. Like when the average person who's not necessarily a huge space enthusiast sees something that looks kind of like them in space, it's kind of similar to when we saw the Tesla in space with the spaceman. It's bringing it more back down to us, and to be able to see like, oh my goodness, this thing looks almost like human, really does kind of like capture the imaginations of those who would, for instance, maybe see an octopus and be like, oh, that's cool, like space calamari, but it's a space person, and you're like, that could be me, or,
I also want to say that Robonaut's development actually began in the late 90s. So it wasn't just something that started like 10 years ago. Like, it was a while back.
On it for a while.
And Robonaut to me is a product of its time. If you look at the designs, the future designs of robots at that time, they're all humanoid, because we expected that we want robots of the future to be humanoid. But now you look we still do in some respects, but you look at companies that are really starting to pull ahead in robotics, like Boston Dynamics, and they're moving away from humanoid designs.
And into dogs.
And not just dogs, but if you look at the specific one that I really like from Boston Dynamics called Handle, which is the one where it's humanoid, but it doesn't have feet, it has wheels at the bottom of its legs, and its arms are attached to its pelvis, because you can do more things in terms of what you need to do with the robot if you have them attached there. So to me, Robonaut was kind of a product of its time, which is we thought that humanoid robots were going to be the way to do it, but nowadays, because of new technologies and new techniques and new modeling systems and other things like that, we actually can push beyond what nature limits us.
Yes, exactly.
So we can actually make things that look absolutely nothing like anything in nature, because it works even better than nature does. And that's why, at least to me, that's why Robonaut ended up looking humanoid, because we were limited at that time 20 years ago in terms of
we had Terminator.
And two things that I do want to say about this is I, for one, really do like the way that it looks. It looks like Boba Fett or the Mandalorian armor from Star Wars, so I really like that. And at the time that it was launching, it did cause kind of a media stir. And a lot of normal folks were just like, oh, what is this? This is cool, and is another kind of gateway to getting into the whole space industry. But the other thing that I did want to say is they actually redesigned it. It was going to have normal humanoid-looking legs, and they changed it for this very reason that we're talking about, and gave it those tentacle-looking legs for that very reason. So, but anyway, let's move on to the next comment. This also comes off of YouTube. This is from Corey Taylor, and he says the first company to be able to not only mine on Mars but also process that ore into ingots. Got a monopoly for the colonies. We're talking about the American colonization. If they want to build their own ships and expand on their own, that's what I want to do. then of course create another company to actually process that metal into usable things. Okay, so probably not necessarily from like a money aspect, because I mean, I don't think that we've even found a whole lot of like gold. I know we've found platinum and stuff like that, but a lot of the metals that we need for our electronics, now that definitely would be something valuable. But again, kind of like what we were talking about in our interview earlier in the show, it's going to be a while before we're processing ores and everything like that. And first, the real kind of resource that we're going to go after is going to be the water ice. But I mean, sure, that would be very cool. I would love to be the known as the platinum miner of space or something like that.
Cool.
Whoever controls the resources controls everything.
Yeah.
So hop
This
to
is
it.
pretty big, too.
Get on
I
it.
guess whoever gets to the water first, the ice water, honestly. And there's not
Get to the water.
Yeah,
Get
water's
to the
life.
Yeah.
Water's life.
Water
Water's
is love.
propellant.
Water is
Water's
life.
everything.
The water must flow.
So, yeah.
All right.
That's right. Get some Series A funding while you can. Hurry up.
While it's hot.
All right, so final comment. This cracks me up quite a bit.
This
is
one.
from this is from ADD Dude on YouTube, who
gosh.
says, "Hey, Athena and Jade, I just noticed that it is normal to have you on tomorrow. As in, today on News Deck, we have Mike, Athena, and Jade, not the new ones."
Were we ever the new ones?
That's what I was
Some
wondering.
point,
The
yeah.
I was like,
newbies.
Yeah, at some
least
point
that's
you
on the
were.
captions.
You were at some point. Is this just my weird and awkward way to compliment and/or congratulate you? I guess you feel like part of the Tomorrow family.
Aw, thanks, ADD dude. Means
Makes
a
me
lot.
so happy.
It was really funny. They even went on to comment a little bit more, but we didn't want to have the huge wall of text there, and went on to describe what is essentially the Tomorrow sitcom.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
He went on to say that like Carrie Ann and Ben are the so Carrie Ann is the too nice mom, and Ben is the pretending to be angry dad, whereas
He's actually angry though.
and I guess we're the kids. We're
Yes.
we're the adopted kids here, and
Just like real life. So, at least for me. So,
IRL.
yeah.
but I think it's hilarious too how anytime that Ben and Carrie Ann are like arguing or something on screen, we're always just like, Mom and Dad are fighting again.
What do we do?
I don't know what Mom and Dad are doing. I'm going to stand over here and just act like I can't hear them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We should all just start going la 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 anytime that happens.
Earmuffs.
Yeah. Grab some earmuffs, put those on.
Yeah.
That's great.
They'll be happy to see later that we have behaved ourselves without the parents here.
Oh, we have the full comment, apparently. An
Yeah.
actual
Oh,
wall
we
of
got the
text.
full thing here.
a lot of
Oh
words
boy.
there.
Oh,
But it
boy.
is a
Like-
very funny wall of text.
Lisa's the other sister, lives in Australia because of reasons. Like, so is your uncle who sits in the next room pretending to watch TV, but really listening to all of you talk about, and sometimes shouts something if he thinks you're wrong.
Especially if Ben is wrong.
Especially if
Where's
Ben
the
is
lie?
wrong.
Oh, and then sometimes the neighbor's son Tim comes over to talk about SpaceX rockets when he's not playing around in his backyard with model rockets and stuff like that.
Oh, Tim.
I love how it describes us as the children. One lives in a swamp somewhere east, dreaming about going back home. The other one lives on a
that's
hill
me.
with a telescope near Mom and Dad.
I think that's him.
This is such a great comment. Maybe,
That took some thought and time, so thank
I
you.
love it.
yeah,
Like,
that was
So good.
Really had to analyze our standing on this show and who we are as
know.
people.
Yeah. That
so.
means that you're a really perceptive viewer because
Yeah.
it's basically all true.
For someone with ADD, you're very perceptive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, anyway, thank you very much for watching. Before we go, we do want to give one final shout out to our ground support citizens. These folks are contributing $1 per episode on Patreon. They get their name in the final segment. And just thank you so much to everyone who has contributed. Every single little bit helps. And just looking at all of these people that are on the screen here, be quiet, I'm trying to be serious.
Sorry, we just got a gem of a comment in the room. So.
But yeah, seriously, thank you so much to each and every one of you who are helping to make this show possible. And if you would like to become a citizen of tomorrow, please visit patreon.com/TMRO to find out more information and some of the awesome rewards that you can get. So thank you so much. That's it for now. We are going to be having a, well, I'm not going to get into exactly to what next show is going to be about, but be sure to join us next week for every live show that we have every Saturday, 1800 Coordinated Universal Time. And we're about to go, before Jared has a heart attack. So, thank you for joining, everyone. Bye.
Oh dear.
Did you open the link?
Oh God.
my
Did we
head
roll?
hurts from laughing.
Did we roll Troy back in?
Oh boy.
Did we roll him back in?
Yeah,
roll
Troy
him.
is still here.
Bring him on in.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Would you like to
Water's fine.
Join us for a bit.
Hilarious to have him watching.
Yeah, it was a bit odd.
I wish I had my phone because this setup here.
took a picture.
So many cameras on us right now.
Yeah.
And then a giant
I wasn't sure who to look at, the cameras or at Troy.
He doesn't know that he was there.
That's hilarious. Let me
His face
go.
seemed like off in the distance.
me
I'm like,
see.
well, that's sad.
Yeah, we wheeled out the TV. Troy was still on, so we flipped it around so that the TV was facing us. I was like, oh, hey, hi.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, when you just
good
when you
laugh.
wheel the TV off the set and it's like
my
facing away, it is just a little bit sad, like you're putting the guest in the corner.
I know.
I know.
Yeah.
That was good. That was great.
No, good show, guys. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you.
Destructor
Thank you. I love the
1701,
backdrop,
of
by
course.
the way. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you just
Thank
put
you.
it up?
Yeah. It's got a couple of banners from some old promotional stuff. It's much nicer than just looking at the wall in the back of the room.
Yeah. It looks
Yeah.
awesome.
It's nice to have a little backdrop like that other than just, a bedroom.
I remember Lisa had like little stuffed animals, I think, in her background, or were we talking about cats? No, you had the cat shirt, and then I think Lisa had a couple really cute little stuffed animals. Adorable. I would make a Jared Muppet.
Animals.
So let's see.
Animals.
Troy, what is the your favorite project that you guys have started so far? What has given you the most personal fulfillment?
Yeah. The favorite one so far would have to be. See, it's really hard to answer because we've got so many people doing sort of a very large spectrum of things. Like space is huge. The one that I'm most excited about. Okay, the ones that I'm most excited about, but that isn't actually, I guess, for most people, isn't going to be that exciting. But when you know the team and you know the background, it sort of becomes really exciting. Is actually on the spatial data side. So there's a group of people in Melbourne, coincidentally, that we were working with from Gemini 1. So this is back last year, early last year. And they have been working with a lot of satellite data for a number of years together. And they went through the NASA Space Apps Challenge, which is actually where Gemini came from. We sort of built it off the top of that accidentally. But I didn't really go into that. And so they had this problem where they don't have essentially like a Google Docs for spatial data. So they'd have to print out a whole bunch of images and have sticky notes everywhere and physically hand them over. And it was really hard. So these guys started developing a platform to share this, all this GIS data and overlay it and work on it in real time. That so far is I think the most exciting thing. Because it's empowering so many people to be able to use satellite data. So if you eventually grab planet data into that, you can do stuff in almost any industry by yourself.
Wow. Yeah, I think that your guys' Gemini program is really cool. I think that's so far anyway. Just looking into you guys, that's the coolest thing that I like about you guys. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to get to our accelerator now because that's where I guess the real interesting stuff really starts to happen because you're sort of a little bit further down the track, and a lot of the people that we had been using as mentors for Gemini are now starting to come in. Will potentially come into our accelerator program. So we've been working with a lot of those guys to make sure that they can do their pitch properly, which is where the communication comes into it. They really understand where their revenue is going to come from, and eventually so that we can help them start raising the funds that they need to do some cool things too. So, for example, a company called Ripple Aerospace. So a couple of the founders are Aussies and they're back in Australia at the moment, but they're actually based out of Florida, doing basically developing sea launch vehicles. and they've just started to I guess they're testing the first aspects of that in the ocean. So it's really exciting to see. And we're talking with them at the moment about potentially coming into the program. We're starting to see people that are developing like Atomos Nuclear in Space they're in Colorado. They're building essentially they want to get to nuclear powered space tugs. And they've started to develop their own nuclear-powered engines, and they've already got started to get contracts for actually selling these essentially power generators to companies that are both terrestrial-based and space-based that they're using sort of to push themselves along that path in sort of a very Elon Musk kind of way of developing the expensive Tesla Roadster and then moving along to making it ubiquitous. There's so many interesting companies that we're just about to bring in to our network as well.
Geez, a legal nightmare for that must be crazy. For that nuclear company.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. I've had a little bit of a chat to them about it. Nuclear law is not one I'm that familiar with, but starting to read up on it now, because I think I love the idea of nuclear propulsion systems, and I think that it's the way to go in space. So I think we need to see more companies doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a question I see in here from Destructor 1701. Hi, I'm Athena. By the way, hello. And they actually ask, how do they, I don't know if you know this, how do they get licenses for nuclear materials? I don't even know.
So they have explained it to me. At the moment, I believe there's not too much involved because they don't have incredibly enriched uranium. So they're using uranium, but it's not highly enriched, so it's not too dangerous to work with. I think they might have mentioned that it's something like 5% pure or something like that. So apparently for them, it hasn't actually been very difficult to get access to. But if I tried to explain any more than this, I'd just be making it up, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll find out soon.
Cool.
I do know that it is a lot easier to get the non-weapons grade uranium. But still a super complicated process, especially if, it might be easier, like if you were a company in the United States doing this, but if you're a company in Australia,
which they are at the moment.
How would you classify it as non-weapons as opposed to weapons? Like, is there really a big significant difference?
There's different grades. Yes, there's different.
So you
there's
can't
different,
use a
whole different grades
for weapon purposes. What if I wanted to try and
if you tried to use a non-weapons grade uranium, it wouldn't have. If you could even get it to work, it wouldn't have as big of an impact. It wouldn't have as much destructive force to it. That's what they say. And this is my like second grade education on it. So from what I know, but from what I understand, there's so many different types of it, and some are more radioactive than others.
Got it.
And that's why the type of stuff that we use for RTGs, the radioactive thermoisotope generators. Is not the same type of uranium that we have in nuclear warheads.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lisa, Mini Stoge, this is exciting. BTW, Moonshot, and TMRO are partnering to host the head of Australia's space agency and some industry leaders to chat about future of Australian international collaboration in space. Check it out Thursday at 8 o'clock UTC. 800 UTC? Okay.
800 UTC.
And so, wait, so if it's like 8:30, it would be like...
That would be like...
8:30, how would you say that?
8:30.
Oh, 8:30? Okay. Because this morning, the launch I was doing was 23:30, and I just said 23:30, so that would be correct, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Very new at this, guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome, as far as UTC. That's awesome. Cool. Yay. So, yeah, check it out Thursday at 0800 UTC, and there's a link in here.
That would be 1...
Guys, that's so exciting.
That would be 1 a.m.
That's going to be a really cool talk because... So I don't expect many people outside of Australia to be too aware, but so we've been working on, I guess, a space agency in the background since late 2015, and so the people that I've got on this panel, so this is actually one of the first, well, like basically the first time that the head of the agency is going to be coming out and then talking about a lot of this stuff, and so she was leading this expert reference group with the other people that I'll have on the panel, who over the last year have been working to understand, okay, what does the new space industry look like globally, and how do we build a space agency for this? And they put that proposal to the federal government, and just this week they've announced that, yeah, cool, we're going to go ahead with a bunch of these things. So a lot of people are asking, So a lot of people in Australia are either disappointed because it's, you know, it's a $26 million budget to begin with, which is very, very small, as we know. And so they're wondering about that because, you know, they were expecting to see astronaut programs and all this kind of stuff. And then there's others that are saying, oh, this is a big waste of money. Why are we doing this? So it's going to be a really great talk to sort of to clear a lot of that stuff up, because I really, the entrepreneur in me really likes this idea of building a space agency like a startup, where we're just starting with a very small amount of funding. We're going to try to work out what works, because there is no real modern space agency at the moment. You know, there's no space agency that's really worked out, well, how do we deal with this huge commercial industry? And so hopefully in Australia we can work that out, because we've got a blank slate to work with.
That's awesome. I see Mac in here wrote, I still can't get over your comment, start small and don't be afraid to fail. I didn't even get that advice in my MBA. That was incredible, by the way. That was so inspirational. I love that entire interview. Actually was like watching that part on the, that was so good.
I was really worried that I'm just waffling, because I'm pretty tired at the moment. I'm like, am I saying words that don't string together? I don't even know at the moment.
You were quite coherent.
So I'm glad it came across.
Yeah, you're gonna sleep all day tomorrow, or just today.
This is one of the things with MBAs, I guess, you know, and you're starting to see a lot of universities try to teach entrepreneurship too. Entrepreneurship is something that can be taught, I think, and you know, because it's a part of what we do with Gemini in the context of space technology. But it's really something that has to be practiced, and that's why it's a big practical component. MBAs don't really teach you how to build something from the ground up. You know, it's much easier to run a company and keep it chugging along, which is what an MBA prepares you for, as opposed to saying, I've got this problem, or the world has this problem, and I'm going to develop a solution that is not just a bit of technology, but it has this whole model around it to make it financially sustainable, socially sustainable, and it can change so you don't end up being a blockbuster with the Netflix coming along or anything like that. And so especially space companies as well, that starting small, it's something that is very possible. Even just talking to people, doing a whole bunch of small experiments as interviews, just is your customer and end consumer, go and talk to 1,000 people and run interviews and try to be as objective as possible and have your hypothesis there and collect data so that you can say, look, I've spoken to 1,000 people and I'm being, I'm very scientific in how I did it, and this is why this model is a really good idea. And this is, we're going to make this much money, but we just need this much capital invested to move to the next stage. And that's what we're looking to help people with.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it really does just come with like getting out there, like in the world, like you're even saying, is that you don't really get taught that, how to find out what's wrong in the world and how to fix it. It has to come with, you don't learn that in school. It really is about getting out there and like seeing the world, seeing what's going on, and then knowing that you have enough to actually make an impact. So that was like, that was great. That was super awesome. There's so many comments in here. Let me try and find one. There's so many good things in here. I love this.
I know. This was a good one. Hanny's Forward from Twitch. I swear I will get that name right someday. But they're asking, is Australia doing anything to entice space engineers and entrepreneurs back to Australia? Wasn't really aware they had a shortage. But, I mean, in terms of being competitive on the global scale, do you know of anything?
Well, I guess so. I'm actually doing a bit of work with quite close with the new Australian Space Agency, obviously, and we're talking to different Australian government departments at the moment, because with this accelerator that we're running, this very first one, so we eventually envisage having these sort of scattered around the world. But I'm based in Melbourne, and that's sort of where the first one's naturally fallen. So we're looking for global startups that have really good ideas and mostly really, really passionate teams to come to Australia at the moment. So if that does match you, this is one of the things that we're working on. If you'd like to come to sunny Australia, this is an opportunity. And if you'd like to work with, we're building. So this is the great thing. We're building new industry from the ground up, essentially. We've always had all the components, but now it's sort of getting injected with some resources that it needs to really thrive. And so if you want to ride that wave, get in touch with me, because we're offering that gateway to come and let you get involved at the moment.
Don't mind if I do.
Yeah.
Don't gotta tell me twice.
But even if you don't think you could make it across to Australia, we do, like I said, we do run the Gemini program, and we will eventually have some more accelerators scattered around. And there are some, in the US, for example, in California, there's Lightspeed Innovations. They're one of our partners as well. They're really good friends of ours. They accelerate space startups as well. So there's different opportunities that are available to you also.
So I'm a little curious because it sounds like you've already reached into some really interesting parts of the world. Do you currently have any startups that you're working with in any region of Africa at the moment?
So a couple of weeks ago, I've had a lot of emails and messages and things like that from people from Nigeria to South Africa and those sort of just sort of around the whole continent, and we haven't really had the ability to run anything there yet. We think we will in Nigeria. So we've got a few partners. So just a few weeks ago, I was in Istanbul. Launching a new thing for a group called the Global Entrepreneurship Network called Gen Space. So there's a new global sort of space entrepreneurship board there. And so there was a group of us that were there, and I met some people from Nigeria. And so we're now going to try to launch some stuff there with them as well. So one of the interesting things about the way that we run Gemini is that it's sort of an online program, but also has that big offline community component. So the online part enables us to scale it up with taking minimal resources. But then we use local mentors and local partners to actually host physical events and get those physical face-to-face discussions happening. So when we launch in Europe, this is what I'm really excited to do. Unfortunately, it doesn't work the same. So we've got a big presence in North America already. We just haven't run the program yet, but we've got a lot of mentors and network there. Unfortunately, the time zones don't really line up with South America, but with Europe, it's perfect with Africa. And so because we run these programs based on zones as opposed to regions, when we're actually running the European program, we're going to be able to leverage all those experts that are in the space industry there, with the European Space Agency or wherever else, because they'll be on the same calls with all of those people that are joining us from Africa. So if you're in Africa, all we need to get you up and running, because we're starting to move towards, I guess, more of a franchise model. This is, we're really empowering those local leaders to take over and try to build this up. So if we've got somewhere, that you can have, in an area, 10 people that can sit around a boardroom table once a week, and then you can find people that are happy to log on to a webcast to listen to the special guest speaker who's talking for that week. Then we can run the program for you, and you'll be able to learn and hear and interact with people who are the space experts of Europe. So yeah, I'm really excited to do that later this year.
Yeah, awesome. Super cool.
Let's see here.
Sweet.
I don't know where Jared went.
I think Jared quit. He's like, well, I'm done.
I'm done.
Goodbye. Farewell.
Oh man. Well, I did want to kind of sorry to derail here for a little bit, but I'm going to be traveling out to the Baltimore, D.C. area. I'm flying out tonight and going to be hopefully attending the Antares launch if the schedule holds, and it launches on Monday morning. And so anyone of you guys that might be watching that are in the Baltimore, D.C., Virginia, Maryland area, I'm trying to host a little meetup tomorrow on Sunday near the Air and Space Museum. So me and Mac will be there for sure. So just trying to get as many people that might be interested involved. So just wanted to put that out there real quick. So you guys can hit me up on Twitter if you're interested, or you can shoot me an email at michael@tmro.tv. And yeah, let's have it a little impromptu tomorrow meetup.
Let's nerd out.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Let's nerd out.
Nerd out with our brains
I wish
out.
I could come over.
So you mentioned that, Troy, so you have a lot kind of brewing in North America right now. So it sounds like you do a lot of traveling over there. Do you ever come over here in this country?
Yeah. This year I've been there, I think, 2 or 3 times already. Yeah. So for the last, I guess, what's it, about almost a year now, I've just almost been constantly traveling to launch all these programs and to build up our network. And it's always better to meet people face to face, especially when you're creating some of the big partnerships that we are. So I was last there I went to DC for the Satellite 2018 conference. Moonshot was one of the sponsors of the startup space pitch competition, and then I went there to judge. Saw some really amazing startups there. I think 2 weeks before that, I was in the US, or I had a week gap where I went to the other side of the world. I was in Singapore and Malaysia, and then I went back to the US again. So before that, I was in California and Colorado. So we're doing a lot of, I guess our biggest presence is probably actually in Boulder and Denver, where they've got a big sort of, I guess, aerospace industry there. We've got a lot of our network there, and there's so many Aussies that are working in the space industry there. It's really crazy. I had no idea. So I've got a lot of new friends there too. So in the US in particular, and I guess the next one after that's probably Houston actually, but I haven't been able to get there yet. When I tried to go there, it was a Hurricane Irma that was there, or Harvey. I don't know, both hurricanes got in my way of one of my trips, which was very unfortunate. Yeah. So so like the big cities that we'll be launching this program in, because I've traveled there to them multiple times now, is so we got San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Houston, Boulder/Denver. We sort of got it as one but two cities. We've got on the other side Boston, New York, and it'll be somewhere on the space coast of Florida, because Andy's in Melbourne, but we've got a lot of contacts. It's hard because everyone's sort of spread up and down that coast, so we're not sure exactly where we'll run that one yet. And then we've got Toronto in Canada as well, and Waterloo. We're working with the guys at sorry, too early in the morning now. Forgotten.
Oh, I know the sun's probably coming up.
I go to a few locations.
Probably coming up.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Did you have any other plans today that you had to be awake for, or can you kind of just like sleep for the rest of the day? And
hopefully.
Yeah.
No, it's not too bad. I tried going to bed a little bit earlier than I usually do, which was really difficult on a Saturday night. So I did get to bed a little bit earlier. So I'll sleep in for a little bit. I've just got some work to do, some emails.
Yeah.
Just it's a busy time at the moment. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it feels good because like I think you picked up on our blog. We were really quiet for the first sort of 4 or 5 months, and I'm always really big on trying to communicate what we're doing, and just couldn't get a chance to do it. And so finally, we're sort of able to announce all these little bits and pieces, and there's still more news to come too. So, yeah.
One last question that I did want to ask you is if there is anyone that you could work with, whether it be a government agency or an aerospace company or even an individual, who would you like to collaborate with for a space project? Anyone, anything.
Me personally, or for Moonshot?
Well, both. How about both? Let's start with Moonshot. Who would you like to collaborate with Moonshot first?
Okay, so who I'd like to collaborate with, and we sort of already are with these guys in a way. So Axiom Space. Do you guys know Axiom Space?
Yes, yes.
So Axiom Space, founded by Michael Sabatini, ran the ISS for a number of years. So Emir Blockman, who was one of the founders of the Space Angels, is now their vice president and is raising their first round of funding for their space station. Huge amounts of money. We're talking like hundreds of millions of dollars for a first round. So he's on our advisory board, and I caught up with him when I was in LA late last year. I think what they're doing is, and this is why he reached out to me. There's such a synergy there, because they're trying to develop this space station. They want people to be using it for manufacturing and research and all this stuff, and to be, I guess, as the opportunities open up much more than they are on the International Space Station. And for us, we're trying to cultivate all these new companies with commercial business models to do exactly that. And just the idea of someone having a commercial space station is absolutely still hard to comprehend, but they're actually doing it. So we sort of are working with them in a way through our connection with Amir. But that's just such a cool project. In terms of personally, that's definitely still there. Personally, I'm really excited by the idea of space mining and space manufacturing. to be able to find materials in space, whether it's recycling stuff that's already up there, like satellites, and sort of using them for parts, whether it's mining new materials and being able to process that, and having essentially autonomous manufacturing in space that's really cool stuff. Yeah, awesome. I'd love to be working with someone that's doing that.
Very cool. Very cool.
Oh.
Well, I think we're going to have to cut this short, though.
He's like,
we're going to have to wrap up here. But thank you very much for coming on. This has been a great interview, and thankfully your connection was really good this entire time. Normally, all our Australian guests have,
I was really worried.
Australian bandwidth. So.
No, for sure.
But
guys. Well, thanks very much for having me on the show. And I'll come and say hi to you guys. I'm going to be in California in around September, so I'll reach out to you guys and yeah.
Yes, please. That'll be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. We'll get some sleep now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Troy. Thank you. Yay, September.
Yay.
And thank you to everyone. I think we're pretty much all wrapping up here. Was there anything else anyone wanted to?
We have 2 space pods.
Oh yeah, space pods. I'm just like, all right, turn off the cameras, everyone. Let's go home. We got space pods to do. Oh yeah.
I closed out of rundown.
I'm gonna get out of the way then, so y'all can
do your thing.
Actually, let's exit out, and we'll just do space pods off air, and then it will be a surprise for everyone when they get to see them.
Yay!
There you go.
Okay, cool.
Goodbye, internets.